Everybody, welcome back. I'm joined today by former Assistant Director of the FBI for Counterintelligence, my friend Frank Figliuzzi, host of The Bureau and author of The FBI Way. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me. People will start talking if we keep meeting like this.
I'm sure it'll be okay. The reason I wanted you on today is because over the weekend I saw you do several hits about the differences between inherent contempt and criminal contempt, as we're talking about specifically relating to Bannon right now with the potential criminal referral. The vote is on Tuesday to the Department of Justice. And I wanted to just get some things sort of cleared up because there's a lot of misinformation going around out there on these two things. And I was hoping you could tell us, first of all, the difference between, I'm sure listeners are up to speed on what's going on, but what is the main difference between inherent contempt and criminal contempt?
Yeah, sure. And I want to caveat this by saying a couple of things. First, I am never going to pretend that I am an expert on any particular legal matter when you've had experts on, you've had true experts on in the law. Okay, so I'm a national security guy who went to law school, spent 25 years at the FBI. I look through everything through a security lens, and I'll talk about that. So that shades my opinion of things. That's first. And to also say that I understand that reasonable minds, and minds better than mine, differ on where I'm going to go with this. But okay. Basic definition by Frank Figliuzzi's understanding. 3 kinds of contempt of Congress. The first is civil, where the committee and the Congress would choose to go to a civil court like a lawsuit and sue for the information that they need, whether that's testimony, whether that's documents, and or both. That's a civil action that can be taken. The second is criminal. Now let's understand that the civil, because it goes into the court system, means, and I've had some questions on my social media about this, so let's do this. We all know you've got a very savvy audience, but let's do the refresher. There are 3 branches of government. Congress is part of the legislative branch. When they decide to go into the court system, they're leaving the legislative branch. Okay, and they're in particular on a civil case, which it would be interesting as to who would be the lawyers in that. Not clear on that, but clearly they would be relying on ultimately on the judicial branch to make a decision from the bench. Okay. Number 2, criminal contempt. That means, and we're seeing that, apparently we're going to see that at least a vote from the committee on Tuesday on this. That's a decision to leave the legislative branch and go to the executive branch represented by the U.S. Department of Justice. And that means you're going to enter the federal criminal system. They're going to have to number one, DOJ would then, if armed with a whole House vote for contempt, DOJ would have to weigh in, make a prosecutive decision like they do on a bank robbery or anything else. Do we have enough to proceed? They would then convene a grand jury, likely in the District of Columbia. That's what seems to be called for. And a grand jury of citizens from the district would be sitting there going, be presented a case by an assistant U.S. attorney, remember, from the executive branch, DOJ, and would have to weigh in on whether Bannon has indeed violated the statutory elements of contempt of Congress. Okay, number 3, inherent contempt of Congress. This is largely a standalone, kind of BYOB, bring your own bottle, legislative branch deal where they go, you know what? Thanks DOJ, thanks Judiciary, we're going to do this ourselves. And we're going to lay hands on Bannon. We're going to throw him in a brig. And, throughout American history, by the way, the brig also has consisted of the Willard Hotel in the District of Columbia. Could be a number of things. Could be a jail cell in the basement that they have to blow the dust off of in the Capitol. But that's entirely unreliant upon other branches. There's my understanding. What is my position right now, as of today and yesterday, and the appearances you're talking about I've made on TV? I'm uncomfortable in an environment in our society where we are clearly losing the concept of 3 equal branches of government. may have already lost it. We'll find out soon. I'm uncomfortable with Congress saying, you know what, we really don't want to do this by ourselves. We're going to go outside to the executive branch. Here's the danger in that. Number one, it's obvious. They're thinking, hey, not best right now for us to do this ourselves. Remember, I'm really thinking about democracy challenges and 3 equal branches. And if a branch goes, well, we're really not that equal, we're going to go rely on these people over here in a different branch, that bothers me. Number two, if they lose at DOJ, which by the way, could happen along the road. It could happen on an initial prosecutive decision. It could happen at the grand jury level, or, and stand by for this, as Bannon appeals whatever the heck happens to him, it could be lost on appeal. Now you've got a situation where the committee's going to go, okay, you know what? We're going to do this ourselves with inherent contempt. That is going to smell very badly from a public perception standpoint. They've already lost in the criminal justice system, and they're going to go, well, let's try it ourselves. That by its nature says this is junior varsity, this is Plan B, and it smells, right? So I'm concerned about that.
It does seem that they're going forward with the criminal contempt. I mean, the vote is Tuesday. We don't yet know when a full House vote will be scheduled. One has not been. I think I've seen some kind of disinformation out there that it's not going to happen till Thanksgiving or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it'll happen faster than that.
Yes.
But we'll see. But how do you, if we're just going forward with criminal contempt, because I agree with you on an inherent contempt, I do. Make yourself the equal branch that you are and do that first and foremost. Although I think Daniel Goldman has said there needs to be a process within the rules of the House to alleviate constitutional due process concerns. And that's confusing me. Can you maybe explain that?
Well, no, I too read Goldman's statement and had to do some research there. And listen, I'll defer in a second to Dan. He's great. And I was troubled. It was a wake-up call, because it was like, hold on a minute. Are you telling me that this power that Congress has really hasn't been worked out in terms of the details? Like yes, you do need due process, because yes, the American public is not going to sign off on some sergeant at arms handcuffing Bannon and sticking him in a room if there really is no agreed upon due process. I'm going to be upset by that. So yeah, apparently they need to either refresh it or work it out for modern day, or everyone has to vote on what that process will look like if they do it now. Yeah, that's not worked out either. But if that has to happen, stand by for delay after delay and obfuscation and all of that from the Republican side. But by the way, you're going to see that on the criminal contempt side as well. I think there's a lot of people, I know people are becoming very cynical, but a lot of people out there, oh, well, this will happen pretty quickly. We'll have this contempt label to slap on Bannon. Said by the way, he will wear that label with pride.
Oh yeah.
There's been reports that Kash Patel, for example, is already profiting and fundraising off of just the mere subpoena to Congress. Can you imagine if Bannon is stuck in a cell or called to be held in contempt? He'll love it. He'll love it. So there is going to be delay. Lawyers are going to come in secretly funded by who knows who, and you're going to see challenges like crazy. The notion that we will actually get documents and or testimony from Bannon, in the next few weeks, I think is foolhardy. I just do. Even if it moves at warp speed, right? So the whole House votes in the next week or two. Great. DOJ goes, Garland says, yeah, he's clearly in contempt. We're going to hold a grand jury. Okay. Now you're going to see the filings from defense attorneys. Can't do it. And then the grand jury has to be convened. Yeah, well, there's already a grand jury sitting usually in DOJ. Of course there is. So you show it, you present, yes, and they say, yep, by God, he violated, he's in contempt. Okay, another legal battle. And while appeals are going on over the grand jury proceeding, right? It's going to take forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that due process that you and I have been talking about and sort of trying to temper expectations on social media, saying, look, there is a 3-day notice to require a vote in a committee. That's why it's Tuesday. It's not because they hate you. There is, and then there are notice requirements for the full House, and then it has to go to the Department of Justice. There is a due process procedure.
And what will that full House vote look like? The scheduling of it, right? Oh, wow, look at this. Oh, Thanksgiving. Oh, Halloween. Oh, and then debate and people standing at podiums for hours on end, and Fox News calling it an assault on our civilization. It's long.
Right, but yeah, and exactly. But that, the point I think you're making is that we do have a due process procedure in place for criminal contempt. We do not right now have a modern one for inherent contempt. And I think that's why Ted Lieu is introducing this legislation for that. But why this wasn't done 6 months ago?
I think we're learning. Look, if one thing we can credit Trump for, and 4 years of Trump for, it's that we now have a long list of things to do, to fix, right? It's a fix-it list. And this is one of them, like, oh, we didn't have due process in place for inherent contempt. Holy cow. Yep, and we're good. And the other thing I note, because now I'll talk about something I know a little bit more about, which is my security hat. I get really concerned, AG, that while all of this is going on, Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, Trump, everybody else, now really saying they're coming at us, they have no legal standing. Not only the fundraising is going to happen, but more importantly, this violent extremist ideology will be on steroids. The threats against Congress and particularly members of the committee will go up. As we move toward talking about the midterms, this will become a very hot issue. And, people will say, Bannon's going to become a hero. He'll love every minute of it. Kash Patel and Mark Meadows will watch this carefully. If you want to see people obstructing, wait. We've been told, oh, they're engaging with the committee. That doesn't sound substantive to me, but we'll see. But they're going to wait and see what happens to Bannon. So even a victory with Bannon is going to delay the others because they're going to go, no, I'm going to wait and see what happens to Steve. I'm not going to cooperate. So it's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a test for them. Although I may have a remedy for all of it, Frank, and I want to talk about that right after this break. Will you stay with me?
I will.
Thanks. Everybody, we'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back. We're talking with the author of The FBI Way, host of the Bureau podcast, amazing podcast, Frank Figliuzzi. And Frank, I went out on a limb and said I might have a solution to all of these problems. You ready?
I got my pen and paper in front of me.
Department of Justice criminal investigation into the plot to overthrow democracy.
In the form of a special counsel or an FBI investigation or all of the above? Or?
DOJ, special counsel, something criminal, something that the Department of Justice would either have to recommend or do. Because all of this, I noticed myself getting into the weeds over the weekend about the process involved in criminal contempt. And I think that the select committee is important, and we need to go through these exercises in order to ensure that Congress has its inherent power and is an equal branch of government. It's an important exercise, and to get the truth out to the American people. But Bannon, once we do get him, he's just going to either lie or plead the fifth, and his testimony is going to be crap. But I mean, this isn't a criminal proceeding. What's important to me is that alongside, in parallel, or in addition to the select committee, there needs to be a criminal investigation. And Adam Schiff has said this weekend he doesn't see any signs of that. Coming from him is a little different than me not hearing about it.
Very troubling.
And so we might not have gotten to that point yet. We might not have gotten in the investigation ground up from the insurrection for the Department of Justice to start subpoenaing Bannon. Because if he had subpoenaed Bannon and Patel, we would have heard about this by now. I'm certain of it, because that's all Bannon does, is use these subpoenas to fundraise. So what are your thoughts about this, the bigger picture, how we get out of this? Because I don't want to downplay the importance of the committee, but I think that there's other things that need to be done.
Okay, I am with you virtually 100% on this. And the reason why you haven't heard me yet screaming this from the rooftops is because I guess I was still almost naively holding out some hope that this was all part and parcel of the ongoing DOJ investigation, FBI, that's been well over 600 indictments, arrests. so far. Now let's look at the signs and clues. It's disturbing to hear Schiff say he doesn't think it's happening. You're right. Initially, I was encouraged by NBC News DC reporter who's all over this stuff, McFarland, who got a hold of an FBI interview report of one of these knuckleheads who's been arrested. And they asked, I believe it was an oath keeper. And they asked him, among the questions, hey, have you been in contact with anybody from Congress? Do you know any staffers, any Congress members, blah, blah, blah. That to me was, wow, okay, so this is part of a set collection list of questions being asked in this investigation. That tells me they are interested in looking at potential for criminal Congress involvement. Outstanding. But after that, AG, there has been crickets in terms of clues that they're really, really digging in. And one thing against the notion that they're digging into the origins, the planning of this, aside from 3%ers, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, is the fact that DOJ did not object to the select committee subpoenaing Bannon, Meadows, Patel, right? If they were all over these guys and they were key to this criminal inquiry the FBI is doing, I think we would have heard DOJ go, hey, time out on these people. You're going to mess with what we're doing. The fact that we haven't heard that yet is further evidence that, yeah, there's likely not, the current investigation may not include that scope. And so I'm with you. If that's true, then we got to add that into the scope of the pending DOJ investigation.
Yeah, and we have seen some other hints too. For example, the 7-hour testimony by Rosen behind closed doors with the January 6th committee. The fact that these interviews for a committee that's supposed to get the information out to the public are being conducted behind closed doors gives me a little bit of hope that they're trying to keep this stuff, they're trying to keep it from going ollie north, right? In Iran-Contra. And then of course we had that, I think it was an Oath Keepers lawyers arrest or search warrant said that one of the 9 crimes they were looking for material for had to do with seditious conspiracy. And so, but that could just be within the Oath Keepers and not necessarily reaching out up above them, much like you said, the templated questions from the FBI asking about whether or not any members of Congress had been spoken to.
And you're right. And I want to be clear here because I can already hear, Tucker Carlson playing our discussion on his evening show, which, I want to be clear. There has to be proper legal predication to add people to the scope of a criminal investigation. And I am saying that from what I have observed and researched, I do believe there is adequate predication, not just willy-nilly. Frank and AG want to add all of Congress to the inquiry. I'm not saying that. I'm saying with specificity of certain members, certain people in Trump's orbit, maybe even Trump himself. Yes, I do believe I have seen adequate information in the public domain that causes me to believe there's predication to add them to an investigation.
Yeah, and not just that, but we could talk about the 6-point coup for dummies memo written by John Eastman, or the letters Jeffrey Clark wrote to 7 states.
Clark, are you telling me there's not a case on Clark? I know the IG at DOJ was looking at DOJ employees, but guess what? Clark's no longer a DOJ employee. So the IG has little to no authority over him, can't compel him. So yeah, someone's got to be looking at this. And it does, and look, I understand Garland, the tightrope that Garland has to walk, right? Can't appear to be political. Hence the very quick statement after Biden, told a reporter, yeah, I want to see them. Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, I get that. But my God, politics is one thing. Saving democracy is something else. And yeah, he should be unafraid to say, I have probable cause or predication to add people to an investigation.
Yeah, that I concur, although I understand the rule of silence. We've posited together, Frank, that perhaps it's just not there yet. Maybe the Department of Justice is trying to insulate themselves from looking political by waiting for an inspector general referral or a congressional referral. But man, that's you're running out the clock.
If that happens, and if that's what they're waiting for, they are undermining their potential future inquiry by allowing Congress to perhaps even cut deals with people or do behind the scenes interviews. Who knows what's going on? that could get really messed up.
Yeah, and I am glad that Benny Thompson, who chairs the committee, has said they are working with the Department of Justice to ensure that nobody steps on anybody's toes, meaning that there might even that there's a glimmer of a potential of an investigation. Otherwise, I think that the DOJ would just cut them loose to do whatever they wanted.
I agree. Very true.
But we'll see. I think the first big test is going to come from whether the Department of Justice goes after these decides to prosecute criminal contempt. Well, I think that's a second big test. First big test was the Mo Brooks refusal to represent Mo Brooks in his lawsuit, which was beautifully written and sent a shot across the bow to any federal employee.
I love that. I love that. And by the way, I know people have pointed out the language regarding referral for contempt says DOJ shall, that's a really big word in law school, shall convene a grand jury. Okay. A shall, of course, assuming that everything's on the up and up and there's sufficient cause, but I think they may not have a choice. I think they have to do it.
Yeah, a couple of experts I've spoken to said they probably do have larger prosecutorial discretion than we would think based on the DC U.S. attorney shall present this to a grand jury. But again, we will see, and it's not going to take long to get this test back. It's not going to take as long as some of the other things that we're facing.
I agree. Yep.
All right. Thanks so much. Everybody get the book, The FBI Way. Check out the Bureau, the podcast, and look for him everywhere on TV doing hits. I appreciate your time today, Frank Figliuzzi.
Anytime. Thanks.
MSW Media.